Hi everybody, it's great to be back here on Itamar. It's Friday. Beautiful day here on Itamar. Let us always talk good about the land of Israel. Yes, it is beautiful summer here. Everything is great in the land. This week's portion is a lesson about the love of the land of Israel. And I want to read chapter number 27, verse 1. Please open up your Tanakh, chapter 27, verse number 1. And what does it say? In the book, of course, Bamidbar in Numbers. It says like this. Vatikravna benot Tzlofchad, and the daughters of Tzlofchad, they came. Ben Chefer goes to list the genealogy, the son of, Tzlofchad, who was the son of Chefer, who was the son of Gilad, who was the son of Machir, who was the son of Menashe, who was the son of Joseph. Wow. Goes all the way back and relates the daughters of Tzlofchad to the father of the tribe, Yosef HaTzadik, who was, of course, the father of Ephraim and Menashe. And here, of course, we're talking about the tribe of Menashe. Goes all the way back to Yosef HaTzadik. Rashi, on the spot, brings down very, very special words of wisdom. Rashi says, the Mishpachot Menashe ben Yosef, to the family of Menashe, the son of Joseph. Lama ne'emar, right? It sort of repeats. It's very interesting. If you pay attention to verse number 1 here, it says the son of Machir, the son of Menashe. Then it says to the families of Menashe ben Yosef. So it sort of repeats Menashe twice. It's repetitive. And Rashi already says ben Menashe, that it was from the Menashe family. So Rashi says that but he wants to teach us so clearly. Yosef chivei bet haaretz. Yosef loved so much the land of Israel. Shneimar v'alitem et atzmotai mizeh. What is Yosef's simple request to his brothers? Don't forget to take my bones out of the land of Egypt. I want my bones to be buried and returned to the land of Israel. That's what he wanted. It's such a simple request. Let me return and be buried in the land. His love for the land of Israel was always there. Just like he declared that he is an Ivri, stolen from the land of Israel. He was always very quick to say that he was from the land of Israel, and always connecting himself to the people and to the land of Israel. That was Joseph. He was so proud of his heritage and his land. He loved so much the land of Israel. And then it goes on to say, Ubonotav chibu et haaretz. And we see this wonderful character trait, what we see come down in the family. Character traits are passed down because you learn from your parents, you learn from your grandparents, you learn from your, go from all the generations. So if you have a special quality in the family, it's going to go down through the generations. And therefore it says, what are the daughters of Tzlofchad asking? Tenu lanu achuzah, give us an inheritance in the land, which means they also felt this love for the land of Israel, and they therefore want an inheritance in the land of Israel. They want part of the land. And that's an amazing thing over here. So we see how special these daughters of Joseph are. Wow, this is a lesson of love. Love for the land. If we look again, if we go to chapter 26 for a second, we're going to skip back a chapter. Chapter 26, verse number 64. And let's read that verse. And it says like this. It says, after the counting, we know that Moshe is making a whole, again, numbering the people of Israel in this week's portion. And then it says, well, it starts really at verse number 63. It says, Ele pikudei Moshe ve'Elazar Kohen. These are the countings of Moshe and Elazar. By the way, Elazar HaKohen is buried right here, right? See, if you look at my face right over here, right behind me, a little bit below there in the village, the ancient Itamar is where Elazar, that we're reading in this week's portion, is buried. So, try to actually really connect to the ambience, because we're studying about Elazar in this week's portion, and the real backbone, in the background of these great leaders of Israel that are buried in these areas. Elazar is buried right behind me, and this side of the camera, when I'm pointing in that direction, is the city of Shechem where Joseph is buried. So the actual people we're talking about are all around me. And the daughters of Tzlofchad actually inherited this part of the land, because Itamar is the division between Ephraim and Menashe. So I'm pointing in that direction is the tribe of Menashe, and that's where the daughters of Tzlofchad were. There's a beautiful river right here called Tirzah, and that Nachal Tirzah is one of the daughters of Tzlofchad. But anyway, that's a side thing, but it's really not a side thing, because it's such a wonderful privilege to live here in Itamar and live in the backyard of these wonderful places that go way back thousands of years ago in our heritage, and it makes the love of the land even greater for all of us. But anyway, if we go on over here, we see in verse number 63, so it says, these are the accountings again of Moshe and Elazar, HaKohen the priest, which counted the people of Israel in Baalvot Moab, in the plains of the Moab, by the Jordan, in Jericho area, by the Jordan River. And then it says, amongst these there was no man that was counted by Moshe and Aaron in the desert. Why? Because it says, why? Because it says in verse number 65, I'm sorry, because they will die in the desert, and there was only ones who survived was Joshua and Caleb from that generation who left Egypt. But of course, it doesn't include the Kohanim, the priests, because Elazar did leave Egypt, Elazar Kohen. But we learn from here something very interesting, that no one for this generation was, survived. They all died in the desert. It was just towards again the end of the 40 years. But if we see Rashi in verse number 64, Rashi says something amazing. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Aval al hanashim lo nigzera gzerat hameraglim. On the women of Israel, the decree of the spies was not placed upon them. Why? Because they loved the land of Israel. So if you look in the verse number 64, it says, Lo hayaish, there was no man. No man, but there were women. Why? Because the women of Israel were such lovers of the land of Israel, and therefore they didn't. The decree about not entering the land wasn't from the spies. That punishment wasn't upon the ladies. They had the merit of going into the land of Israel. Rashi says, because they loved the land of Israel, which is absolutely, of course, again amazing, and therefore Rashi says it's connected to the portion of Tzlofchad, to the daughters of Tzlofchad, because it shows two stories of those who love the land of Israel, the women of Israel, and of course the daughters of Tzlofchad, and that wonderful lesson. That's why they're brought together, they're bunched together in the Torah. It's absolutely amazing. I want to bring down a few words to continue our line of loving the land. If we look in one of the great commentaries called the Kliyakal, literally meaning the dear vessel. That's the name of his book, and he writes like this. He says, I'll start from sort of I'm not going to read the whole thing here. It's a long discourse, but I want to read part of his essay he writes here about the daughters of Tzlofchad. He writes some very interesting things here. And he says, Aval hanashim, but the women, sheloto dor, that generation of the desert, tzadkaniyot hayu, they were wonderful, righteous women. Vayu ohavim tzedakah, they loved to do charity. They loved to give of their own. Hein mitzvat chala hamiyuchedet lenashim utluya ba'aretz. And he's giving an example of the love to give the charity. What was this special mitzvah? Special commandment upon the lady, the women, was the mitzvah of giving challah. What is challah? We know that when a woman needs her dough, before she bakes the dough in the oven, she has to set aside a certain amount of dough for it's called in Hebrew challah, right? And challah is a special commandment mentioned in the Torah that it's like a tithe. It's like the tithes that we give. And here a certain portion. Tithes, not all instances are 10, right? There are trumot and masot. It's a kind of trumah. It's a kind of gift that the kohanim, the priests, would receive. So they would give when they would make their dough bread, and they would have to set aside a little portion of their dough and give that over to the kohanim, to the priests. And that was a mitzvah, we say, for the women, because they're the ones who are baking the bread most of the time. Of course, if a man bakes bread, he has to also set aside challah. And this law applies only to the land of Israel, which means if you live abroad, you don't really have to separate challah. But nowadays, it's a custom. It has, the rabbis decree that also abroad we have to separate challah for, reasons, not to forget the important mitzvah of separating challah. So it's done by custom also outside of Israel. But the real law of the Torah says it's only a law that applies to the land of Israel. And this was done by the women of Israel to show how much love they wanted to inherit the land. They wanted to be able to do the law of giving part of their own to the priests, to the Kohanim, and that made them so happy of having their inheritance of the land. They can able to grow their wheat and then being able to give part of their grains, as part of their dough to the Kohanim. Now, which is very, very interesting, because we see that this love, the same love that they inherited from Joseph. Joseph, was a man of great righteousness as well. He's called Joseph the righteous, Yosef HaTzadik. And we know how much he gave over to others, to help others, to support others. And that's sort of, again, these genes, these special qualities of giving were ingrained in the daughters of Tzlofchad, his family. And of course, it mentions all the daughters of Israel were part of this special gift of loving the land. It brings down, I'm reading now, continue with the Kli Yakar. I think basically, I summed it up by heart. But those are the things that I want to stress. The love for the land, giving the mitzvah, and of course, comparing to Joseph. And that's really what the Kli Yakar says over here. I suggest if you have time to go and see the whole Kli Yakar, I'm not going to have time right now to go through everything. In addition, I saw, brought down by a rabbi, I saw, a very interesting essay. He's talking about the love for the land of Israel. There are so many sources out there of loving the land and feeling connected. But I saw a nice essay by, I think, Rabbi Brand, who brought down some sources we can learn from, how do we love the land of Israel for? Or give examples. How do we enhance our love for the land? There are certain, we can learn about it. We can tell stories about it. But it's very interesting, and he brings down some examples of great Torah giants that show their love to the land of Israel and their devotion. I'd like to bring some of those down. Here, for example, if we see one of the students of the Vilna Gaon, the great Vilna Gaon, who was a giant of Torah, his student wrote a book called Peat HaShulchan. Peat HaShulchan is a great work on the laws that apply to the land of Israel. And it says like this, he writes like this in the introduction. V'imkein ke'et asher la'agia le'eretz Yisrael hu bekalut. Hachiyuv mitgadel kiflei kiflayim. He's saying now, in his time, he's actually quoting that to get to Israel is not too hard. So our obligation to come to the land, he's saying, is doubled. Our obligation to come to the land. He's saying, V'af im yesh lefamim kshayim, although sometimes there are difficulties. Mekol makom, he says, nevertheless, zeu bichlal, this is in part of Yisurei Eretz Yisrael. It's part of the suffering for the land that it says. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai brings down, the famous author of the Zohar Kadosh. It's brought down in the Talmud. Shalosh matanot tovot. There were three great presents that Hashem gave to the people of Israel. And every one of them were given with a little bit difficulty. What are they? Torah, the land of Israel, and the world to come. And so he's saying, well, basically the Peat HaShulchan is writing is that in his time period, okay, we're talking about the early 1800s, it was a very difficult, the late 1700s, early 1800s, it was a very difficult, time for sure. Those who read history know it wasn't a simple time. But he says, no, it was pretty easy then. Although, he goes, if we have once in a while difficulties, okay. We have to realize that Israel is acquired through difficulties sometimes. This particular rabbi who's writing this went to Tzfat, the holy city of Tzfat, and there was an earthquake, and a lot of his children died, and he went through terrible, terrible calamities, but always happy and always so really, really happy, and he's fulfilling the love for coming to the land with all the difficulties today in our modern times, that we can come on a plane so easily, and Israel is so much opportunity for people to be here. It's of course we have our difficulties, we can't say here in Itama we have our share, but in reality this is the Garden of Eden. This is really the special Garden of Eden here, and anyone who has an opportunity to return to the land and show their love to the land, wow, how could you not take this opportunity today and come back to the land of Israel? If you read, I'm going to read a couple of more sources here that hopefully will show a little bit more of this amazing love of the land. And there's a letter written by the Ol Samech, one of the great rabbis of Israel in the previous generation. He writes like this. He says like this. He goes, once Abraham knew his creator. היה קושר כל תקוותו והבטחתו. And he tied all of his hope and his promise, בנחילו את הארץ הקדושה לבניו, which means of bringing the inheritance of the land to his children. להלך בה לאורכה ולרוחבה, to go from the length and the width of the land. ונטע אשל, and he planted a tree, called an eshel tree. ואחריו יצחק זרע בה וחפר בה בארות מים. And afterwards Isaac came and he planted seeds and he dug wells in the land. And then Yaakov Avinu, he built a house. And he's saying, therefore, the height of their hope, פסגת תקוותם, הייתה כי בניהם ישבו בארץ המוריה, that their children would be on the Mount Moriah. ומيום מתן תורתנו הקדושה, on the day that the Torah was given, לא פסקה הנבואה. The prophecy did not stop to command about returning to the land of Israel. And if we continue the words of the Ol Sameach, he says that God, I'm going to quickly say that by heart, that God's honored the land more than he honored himself. Because we see the sin of the golden calf, he forgave the people of Israel, but he never forgave them for the sin of the spies. Which means when someone despised the land of Israel, Hashem was much more stringent with them. And we saw what happened, the whole generation of the desert was wiped out because they didn't show the love for the land of Israel. And the Ol Sameach goes on, and he talks about, again, he lived in the time, the early 1900s, when they had the conventions, the Zionistic conventions for returning to the land of Israel at that time. The first one at San Remo. But we see out of how, even, again, the reason I'm bringing down these great rabbis, or Sameach, and we'll see in a minute the Chazon Ish, because today the Haredi world in Israel follows very, very carefully the words of these great rabbis. And we see how they themselves were so into love of the land of Israel. And I'm hinting to something that was very painful. When I was in the States just a couple of weeks ago and I was davening in certain places, I was so hurt to see that there's not enough love in the hearts of Jews living abroad for the land of Israel. They should be returning, they should be making aliyah. And we see how even the great rabbis that they claim that they're following, right? There are many great rabbis that love Israel, everyone loves, but they claim they're following these particular rabbis. And we see these great rabbis, they claim they're following. They said there's nothing greater than living in the land of Israel. There's a story brought down, I want to quickly mention here, the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish talks about someone who came over and asked him, he was a student learning from abroad, and he said, listen, Rabbi, I want to know if I have to keep 2 days of Yom Tov. Why 2 days? Because when someone lives abroad, they have to keep 2 days of Yom Tov, of the holiday, not 1 day. In Israel, it's only 1 day. And this is, I'm not going to get involved in why. It's brought down because of there was a doubt, a safek, a doubt when the new moon was declared in Jerusalem until they finally got the answer, met it past a certain time. Whatever it was, there's a reason why there were 2 days abroad. So the Chazon Ish said, what do you mean you think maybe you go back there and if you have to do a second day? He goes, how could a Jew think about returning to exile? How could he think about leaving the land of Israel? So we see again the Chazon Ish, the Ol Sameach, how the love of the land was so ingrained in them. And we should, of course, all learn from these great rabbis, and especially those who claim that they're students living abroad and not returning to the land of Israel. And now, of course, if it's hard for them for certain reasons, let them apologize, say, we want to live here, but we can't because it's hard, but not to justify living abroad. And the reason I'm mentioning this little reproof, this little musar, is only because when I was there right now, just a couple of weeks ago, it was a terrible, terrible feeling in my heart. On Jerusalem Day, I went into a synagogue, and there were those who weren't saying the Hallel, and there were those who were actually saying a certain mourning kind of prayer to mourn in the day that God returned us to Jerusalem after thousands of years. It was a disgrace to feel that, to see that. So we have to realize today we have to be so happy and show the love we have for the land of Israel, and not let us in one way talk bad about the land, and let us return and come back in. This is really the great lesson we see from this week's portion of the daughters of Tzofcha, those wonderful women who show their love, and they were holding on to the land of Israel. And that was the genes of Joseph in there, as we say, and all the women of Israel were blessed because they never gave up for 1 second their love and the desire to be in the land of Israel. And at this opportunity, I want to thank all those amazing friends of ours who are involved in building the land and are really following the same path of Joseph and his family that show their love of the land of Israel to be part of the dream here on Itamar, and helping us build the land and help it grow and flourish and turn into an amazing place, a Garden of Eden that will one day bring back our people home, because so many Jews are still stuck out there abroad. They're not coming back. We want them to come home and return to the beautiful promised land of Israel. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshurot V'Nechamot.